Hello, all you freedom-loving people. The CDC has drastically reduced the vaccine schedule for children. President Trump said that California is next to be investigated for fraud after 2,000 ICE agents went door-to-door in the Twin Cities. And how will the CCP suffer from Maduro's capture? Okay, let's get into it. Today, Homeland Security agents were busy in Minneapolis going door-to-door to Somali care centers. Also, ICE agents who were in the field, along with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, arrested an Ecuadorian illegal alien who was convicted of robbery and wanted for murder and sexual assault.
Had that 2x4 there, so it's not out of the ordinary.
Yeah. What is that there?
And do you know why we're here today?
¿Sabes por qué estamos aquí ahora?
No sé.
You will be held accountable for your crimes.
Vas a ser arrestado por los crímenes que tienes.
And we'll take you in for processing.
Buena pregunta. Yo no cometí un delito aquí.
Dice aquí hacen con mi delito. Okay.
We'll take you in.
What? Okay.
The DHS deployed 2,000 agents and officers from Immigration and Custom Enforcement to the Twin City area on Sunday to escalate its crime crackdown in Minnesota. Officials said that the agents and officers will lead a 30-day surge in operations across the Twin Cities, and they will make the area the first major focus of the Trump administration's crime crackdown in the new year.
We have the largest immigration operation ever taking place right now. It's a great effort by ICE. Both of our components, enforcement removal operations and Homeland Security investigations, they're on the ground. HSI agents, as you've seen in the media, have been going door to door to a lot of these suspected, companies that are not only hiring illegal aliens that shouldn't even be in the country, but also, being involved in potential human smuggling, human trafficking cases, but also looking at these fraud cases as well. But one thing we should really note, too, is the fact that states like Minnesota that have a strong sanctuary city policy and sanctuary protections do attract other illegal aliens to come there to take advantage of welfare, public assistance, SNAP benefits. And that's just a magnet that brings that criminal element that can hide in plain sight. And that's what we're finding up in Minnesota. Very proud to say the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, she was up there today. She ran an awesome, successful operation, got a suspected murderer and a wanted rapist that was hiding, again, in plain sight in Minneapolis. And that's what ICE agents are doing on the ground up there. They're up there taking the fight to these sanctuary jurisdictions that allow these criminally illegal aliens to roam the street and take advantage of the public assistance that should be there for every taxpaying American.
While investigations into fraud in Minnesota go into full force, today President Trump announced a fraud investigation into California. President Trump did not mention any further details, but he wrote, California, under Governor Gavin Newsom, is more corrupt than Minnesota, if that's possible. The fraud investigation of California has begun. President Trump's announcement comes after Steve Hilton, who is running for California governor, and Herb Morgan, who is seeking the state controller job, recently unveiled findings from their Califraudia tip line investigation. Hilton and Morgan allege widespread pay abuse within the K-12 education system of California. And they also noted the known problem of fake community college applications that are designed to steal student aid funds. And also in California, prior reports have described a lack of accountability in homelessness and social welfare funding that raises the risk of fraud and waste. The California State Auditor's recent high-risk report flagged systemic problems across different programs. These programs include CalFresh, which is a program for people with low income, unemployment insurance, and Medi-Cal eligibility. And yesterday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott also ordered an internal fraud investigation into child care services in his state. Under his directive, the Texas Workforce Commission will work with the Health and Human Services Commission to launch investigations into any potential fraud and misdirecting of funds, and to implement anti-fraud measures in order to protect the integrity of Texas's child care services program. The investigation also calls for verifying the number of children that are said to be enrolled in the programs. A final report is expected by February 27th. In the meantime, yesterday, the Department of Health and Human Services verified reports that Somalia's ambassador to the United Nations was involved in a healthcare company that was convicted of Medicaid fraud. HHS Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill wrote on X, "I can confirm public speculation that Ambassador Abukar Dahir Osman, the permanent representative of Somalia to the UN and president of the Security Council, is in fact associated with Progressive Healthcare Services, a home health agency in Cincinnati." The reports about the ties of Osman to Progressive Healthcare Services went viral on social media last week. Osman is listed as having served as Managing Director of Progressive Healthcare Services from 2014 until May 2019. And according to his LinkedIn profile, this overlaps with his tenure as Somalia's permanent representative in New York. Public records list Osman as president and CEO of Progressive Healthcare Services when it was established as a home health care provider in 2009. A few days ago, the Libs of TikTok account on X posted that Osman's healthcare business occupied the same suite as another company, and that there were multiple others at the same address, all with Somali names. Libs of TikTok also shared website screenshots that showed that Progressive Healthcare appeared on a federal list that is associated with Medicare and Medicaid-related crimes. Yesterday, health officials announced that they are narrowing the list of vaccines recommended for children. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, has reduced its broad recommendations of vaccines from 14 vaccine categories down to 8 vaccine categories. This means that from now on, the CDC will stop broadly recommending vaccines against influenza, rotavirus, hepatitis A, and meningococcal disease. And they will now recommend vaccines for 11 of the most serious diseases grouped under 8 vaccine categories for children. The CDC in 2025 already narrowed recommendations for hepatitis B and COVID-19 vaccination, but they have now narrowed down the list even further. President Trump wrote yesterday on True Social, "Effective today, America will no longer require 72 jabs for our beautiful, healthy children. We are moving to a far more reasonable schedule where all children will only be recommended to receive vaccination for 11 of the most serious and dangerous diseases. Parents can still choose to give their children all of the vaccinations if they wish, and they will still be covered by insurance." The CDC is also still recommending some of the other vaccines for specific groups, such as hepatitis B shots for children who are born to mothers who test positive for the virus. But for others, the CDC is shifting toward shared decision-making. They are encouraging parents to talk with their doctors and to weigh factors like health risks before deciding on vaccination. The new schedule also lowers the number of recommended HPV doses from 2 to 1 after some recent research indicated that 1 dose is as effective. Also, the CDC is keeping its recommendation that infants whose mothers were not vaccinated against RSV receive antibody protection in order to help guard against the virus. The changes were recommended by Tracy Beth Hogue, the acting head of the FDA's Drug Evaluation Center, and Martin Kulldorff, a senior advisor who was appointed by Robert Kennedy Jr. in 2025. Hogan Kulldorff said in a 34-page review that the changes were necessary. This was because of declining trust in public health, falling vaccination rates, and evidence that suggests some recommended vaccines offer limited benefit. The CDC also consulted with officials in Denmark, Germany, and Japan, as well as vaccine scientists at the CDC and the FDA, but they did not consult vaccine manufacturers. The new move comes after President Trump in December directed Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and acting CDC Director Jim O'Neill to review vaccine schedules in the United States and other countries in order to determine if their schedules should be updated. RFK Jr. said in a statement, President Trump directed us to examine how other developed nations protect their children and to take action if they're doing better. After an exhaustive review of the evidence, we are aligning the U.S. childhood vaccine schedule with international consensus while strengthening transparency and informed consent. Kennedy believes that this decision protects children, respects families, and builds trust in public health. Nicolas Maduro's capture carries implications far beyond Venezuela. It delivered a sharp psychological blow to Beijing and Moscow, both of which have backed Maduro diplomatically and economically. And its impact on the Chinese Communist Party has been particularly severe. The CCP has been a long-standing supporter of Venezuela. Over the past 2 decades, whenever the Venezuelan dictatorship faced threats, particularly in the face of U.S. sanctions, the CCP has provided economic aid as well as political and diplomatic support to keep it afloat. An article in The Diplomat from August of 2024 contends that it has long been assumed that the Maduro regime remains in power due to support from Cuba, Russia, and Iran. Although all of these nations have provided political, diplomatic, and military support to the Venezuelan regime, none had played a decisive role as the CCP in ensuring Chavez and his successor Maduro had a continued hold on power. Beijing played a pivotal role in the ruling party's electoral victory in Venezuela, providing economic assistance to Chavez and Maduro. Chavez's election victory was secured by trading votes for welfare programs. And to sustain the social benefits, Venezuela sought funding, with the Chinese Communist Party emerging as its principal financial backer. Bloomberg reported that during the 2012 election campaign, the Chavez government purchased 3 million household appliances, thousands of housing units, hundreds of buses, cars, mobile phones, and laptops to win over voters, paving the way for Chavez's 4th term in office. And the Diplomat article contends that funding provided by the CCP had a decisive impact on Chavez's re-election. Following Chavez's death in March of 2013, Maduro claimed victory in the presidential election by a narrow margin. The international community widely regarded the vote count as fraudulent, casting doubt on the legitimacy of his presidency. Against this backdrop, Xi Jinping, the newly appointed leader of the CCP, received Maduro and offered his government $14 billion in aid, elevating bilateral relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership and lending his endorsement to the regime. In the 2018 presidential election, Venezuelan opposition leaders were imprisoned, exiled, or barred from standing. Voters were informed that failing to vote for Maduro would result in the loss of their jobs or social benefits. Most Western nations also refused to recognize Maduro's legitimacy, and they imposed sanctions upon him. However, the CCP recognized the election outcome, and they rejected the United Nations Security Council's resolution to hold a new election. During the 2019 Venezuelan electoral crisis, the CCP supplied riot control equipment to the Venezuelan authorities to suppress protesters. In July 2024, Maduro suffered a crushing electoral defeat when the opposition obtained irrefutable proof of their victory in the form of ballot papers. However, The Maduro regime responded by perpetrating one of the most brazen acts of electoral fraud in history, fabricating election results that contradicted the tally sheets. Determined to cling to power at any cost, the regime launched a brutal crackdown against the opposition. Beijing unreservedly backed Maduro while urging the U.S. government to refrain from interfering in Venezuela's internal affairs. And in 2023, China and Venezuela elevated their bilateral relations to an all-weather strategic partnership. Since then, the two nations have continuously deepened cooperation across various domains, including trade, investment collaboration, cultural exchanges, and governance experience sharing. During the period when the United States imposed sanctions on the Maduro regime and implemented an oil embargo, China remained the primary destination for Venezuelan oil exports. Although Venezuelan crude accounts for only about 4% of China's total imports, it remained a lifeline for Maduro. According to calculations cited by Reuters, China absorbed between 55% and 80% of Venezuela's exports in many months between 2023 and 2025. With access to Western markets restricted, these sales were crucial for the Maduro regime to maintain minimal foreign exchange earnings. And China recently announced the conclusion of a zero-tariff trade agreement with Venezuela, covering hundreds of products. During his meeting with Maduro in Moscow last May, Xi Jinping reiterated that the two nations are strategic partners, describing their relationship as a rock-solid friendship forged from a strategic perspective and long-term outlook. At the time that President Trump announced the start of military action to capture Maduro, the special envoy that was sent by Xi Jinping to Venezuela was toasting Maduro, saying that they wanted unlimited cooperation and a total of 600 projects. It is said that during the capture of Maduro, the CCP's special envoy was still in the capital of Venezuela, not having escaped yet. To outside observers, the friendly relations between Communist China and Venezuela may appear to stem from mutual economic prosperity. China needs to import oil, while Venezuela possesses the world's largest proven oil reserves, and China is Venezuela's largest oil buyer. Yet the fundamental bond between them lies in politics, with both nations viewing the other as an ally in countering American influence. The formation of this strategic relationship and network of interest occurred following the 1998 presidential election in Venezuela, which was won by the communist Hugo Chavez under the banner of anti-Americanism. From that point onward, the nature of bilateral relations underwent a fundamental transformation. Starting in 1999, Chavez had visited China on 6 occasions, making him the Latin American leader who has visited China more frequently than any other. Both successive leaders of the Chinese Communist Party met with Chavez on multiple occasions. Chavez's anti-American narrative of a multipolar world resonated precisely with the Chinese Communist Party's diplomatic materialism and opposition to hegemony. This fostered not merely an economic partnership between the Chavez government and the CCP, but a relationship of comradeship. Nicolas Maduro, who was Chavez's successor, continued to pursue Chavez's policies. During his 2023 visit to Beijing, Maduro emphasized that Venezuela was implementing reforms modeled on the Chinese Communist Party's development approach. It is precisely because Venezuela has faithfully pursued socialist policies that this nation, once among the world's wealthiest, has now become Latin America's most failed state. And funding from the CCP has only exacerbated the deep-rooted corruption within the Maduro regime. By 2017, Venezuela had been ranked as the world's 11th most corrupt nation. So the end of the Maduro era will have several implications for the Chinese Communist Party. Let us first discuss the economic implications. In economic terms, the Chinese Communist Party has consistently provided generous support to Venezuela. According to data that was compiled by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Since 2007, the China Development Bank has extended loans totaling over $60 billion to Venezuela. The core collateral for the loans was not sovereign credit, but rather future oil deliveries. This arrangement was viable while Venezuela's daily production remained at 2.4 million barrels. The problem is that Venezuela's oil production has been steadily declining. As we discussed yesterday, Venezuela is the world's largest oil-producing nation in terms of reserves, holding approximately 1/5 of the planet's crude oil reserves. However, Venezuela's crude oil production capacity is not particularly high. In 1998, 27 years ago, before the social strongman Chavez came to power, Venezuela's daily oil production was 3.2 million barrels. After Chavez came to power, he used predatory means to transform Western oil companies into Venezuela's state-owned oil companies. These companies were treated by the government as a cash cow, extracting funds without any technical investment. But as equipment ages, production efficiency declines significantly. Many experienced technicians also left the country after nationalization. So oil production dropped to about 2 million barrels per day in 2016. And due to monopolizing telecommunications, electricity, and other sectors, the overall production efficiency declined. Meanwhile, oil production further decreased to about 700,000 barrels per day, which is less than a quarter of the peak period. To make matters worse, international oil prices fell from $100 per barrel in 2014 to $30 per barrel in 2016. With over 90% of Venezuela's foreign exchange income relying on oil exports, the plummeting oil revenue forced the Maduro government to print money to cover the fiscal deficit and to fulfill various previously promised social welfare programs. This triggered hyperinflation in Venezuela. In 2020, Venezuela's oil production plummeted to approximately 350,000 barrels per day. Even by the end of 2025, output had only recovered to between 900,000 and 1.1 million barrels daily, which is a level that has long been insufficient to sustain the original debt repayment assumptions. In order to prevent the debt from spiraling out of control on the books, China repeatedly extended grace periods, accepted delayed deliveries, and rolled over principal payments. These measures kept the debt's book value stabilized at around $17 billion to $19 billion. However, as things stand, this money is likely to have been squandered. The Maduro era has come to an end, and Venezuela will undoubtedly hold new elections. Judging by the Venezuelan people's jubilant celebration at Maduro's arrest, it is highly probable that a pro-American government that is committed to a free market economy will be elected. So, the stance adopted by the new pro-American administration toward these creditors will be crucial. The incoming government may challenge the legitimacy of certain loans, citing corruption and mismanagement under the Maduro regime, and they may seek to restructure or write off the debt. Historical precedent suggests that following a change of government in Latin America, new administrations often renegotiate debts owed to China in order to prioritize repayment to Western creditors. Numerous Chinese corporations are also active in Venezuela's telecommunication, energy, infrastructure, and Belt and Road projects, including the latest direct maritime routes and power grid support. Upon the incoming Venezuelan administration taking office, it is highly probable that it will prioritize cooperation with American and Western companies while reducing trade with China. Consequently, these Chinese enterprises will no longer enjoy their previous privileges, and they will have to compete fairly with businesses from other nations facing rigorous market scrutiny. Amongst these sectors, the energy industry will be most severely impacted. Just 4 months ago, on August 24th last year, a Chinese private enterprise signed an unprecedented 20-year agreement to produce oil in Venezuela, committing over $1 billion in investment to develop oil fields and to deploy floating platforms, with a target production of 60,000 barrels per day by 2026. But the situation has changed entirely since January 3rd. President Trump has made it clear that he intends to mobilize major energy companies to invest billions of dollars in repairing Venezuela's long-neglected oil infrastructure, as well as to intervene actively in government operations during the transition period. On Monday, President Trump reiterated that the U.S. government may compensate oil companies for the costs incurred in rebuilding Venezuela's energy sector. The U.S. energy companies that were nationalized after Chavez came to power will be returned to their former owners. President Trump anticipates that once the U.S. oil industry expands its operations in Venezuela, it could be up and running within less than 18 months. Chinese enterprises lack competitiveness against American companies that are backed by the U.S. government. And Venezuela's new government is highly likely to restrict or scrutinize contracts awarded to CCP businesses. So at that point, Chinese enterprises may be compelled to withdraw from Venezuela. Since we've touched upon oil, let us briefly consider the new configuration of the oil market brought about by this American initiative. Venezuela holds 20% of the world's crude oil reserves. American control over Venezuela signifies a dominant position in shaping the future landscape of the petroleum energy market. Bloomberg columnist Javier Blas noted earlier that 40% of global oil production capacity stretching from Alaska to South America now falls under the umbrella of the Monroe Doctrine. The Donroe Doctrine is a neologism combining President Trump's name with Monroe Doctrine, signifying a new Donroe Doctrine for the Trump era. In a recent memo on the national security strategy, President Trump stated, after years of neglect, the United States will assert and enforce the Monroe Doctrine to restore American preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. The United States will possess the capability to maintain crude oil prices around $50 per barrel, thereby securing an advantage against any nation attempting to drive up oil prices by restricting supply in the future. For months, the Kremlin has been using its oil reserves as bait in negotiations with the White House. Now, President Trump can tell Putin that he has no need for Siberian oil fields. He already possesses ample oil reserves. Kirill Dmitriev, the Kremlin's special envoy, also stated that seizing power in Venezuela would afford the United States enormous leverage in the global energy market. Another impact on the Chinese Communist Party is that America's lightning military operations have punctured the false image of China as a military powerhouse. Beijing has persistently promoted the idea that as long as you align with the Chinese Communist Party, the party is so powerful that the West, particularly the United States, will not dare to take action against you. According to Chinese Communist Party propaganda, America will only impose sanctions and will not take direct action for fear of facing international legal sanctions. Venezuela has long relied on China for military equipment, procuring Chinese-made air defense systems with its intelligence and surveillance capabilities heavily dependent on the Chinese Communist Party. Last year, Maduro boasted that the Chinese Communist Party's backing would safeguard his personal security during social clashes with the opposition. He claimed that his alliance with Beijing would secure him cutting-edge technology in drones and counter-drone warfare. But now that Maduro has been captured alive by the United States, China's air defense systems, intelligence, and surveillance prove utterly ineffective against American military strikes. Following the incident, the Chinese Communist Party has offered nothing beyond verbal condemnation. the all-weather strategic partnership has become nothing more than empty rhetoric, devoid of any substance. Michael Soboluk, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, stated that the Chinese Communist Party refrained from intervening to aid Iran during last year's Operation Midnight Hammer because they lacked the capacity to project power and to thwart American action. They also declined to assist Maduro for the same reason. This has led every pro-Beijing regime to ask themselves, when push comes to shove, will Beijing really come to my rescue? And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below this video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.